Hello, fellow bassists. This is George Mesa with the Bass Player University. And today's episode, if you saw the thumbnail, you may be wondering just what I meant. Why am I quoting an ancient, at this point, political phrase from the 20th century? And the phrase came to mind as I was thinking about what the next episode was going to be, which I often do think about. By the way, I was thinking about something that I've had trouble from time to time with certain students when they're starting to get good at slap and they're advancing their technique. And when I say good, by the way, I personally wasn't satisfied with mine for many years, and I wasn't even using it. I would often, as I've shown, please do check back the episode that says, "Can you even metal?" where I discussed my my particular techniques that I use when I play metal, especially extreme metal. I get more of a slap tone, more of a Chris Squire angry mid-range thing by attacking the strings in a very certain heavy-handed way, or actually using 3 fingers to pluck to get through faster phrases, all in an effort to either avoid using a pick, which I have with my thumb at all times. Got my thumb ready to pick at any time. But I was looking to achieve as much of a slappy thing without slapping at all. At first, I thought that was going to be my thing, that I wasn't never going to slap. But there's certain things that you just can't do without the technique itself. So back to the original statement here. I had trouble, and I wasn't saying that I'm not saying that I didn't get through them. I was able to guide them, but I started noticing with anyone that said, "I want to learn slap today," their left hand was very tight or strong or closed too much, or they were just overlapping themselves or over squeezing, which is a humongous problem with most, self-taught guitarists and bass players. Over squeezing. Way more than you have to. I'm over squeezing right now. I'm squeezing a lot less now. It actually sounded louder. Did it not? Rewind and check on that. I think that it did. If you don't pluck super hard and don't squeeze super hard, not choking the string, in other words, you're going to get a louder sound with more sustain. Keep in mind that there is a certain arc to how notes are developed. If you ever used a recording software to record yourself, you'll see there's this, big block of sound, and then the sound wave gets smaller as the note stays. There is the attack, the sustain, and artificially here, the decay of the note. A harmonic jumped in. I don't know if any of you caught that. It was from the E string. It was not from the A, which I just plucked. And I did do some videos on harmonics. Please do go check that out too. So what's the point? Why would you speak softly and carry a big stick or carry a big bass, as I said in this case? My main idea and what I wanted to present to you, because you may be experiencing your problem yourself, or you might not realize it. This is, by the way, the benefit of having a teacher, a coach, who can watch you play and tell you it looks like your left hand is a bit stressed. It may not even be a problem. You might be getting the sound you want. Or you might not realize what kind of sound you can get by changing it. More importantly, 5, 7, 10, 20 years later, you could be suffering some very serious consequences. Nerve damage, and anything you want to name. RSIs, repeated stress injuries, are very common for bass players. I mean, look what we're doing, right? We're manhandling. No pun intended. I want men and women to play bass at all times. But that's just the name. That's just the word, right? So when you overpower your instrument, you're just forcing your way, and you're not getting the most out of it, as a matter of fact. And you may not notice it until you get into a studio or record yourself, which I very much recommend that everyone always does. Record yourself, even if it's a crude, simple, cell phone recording. Record yourself, listen back. Was it as good as you thought? Was it better than you thought? Was it not as clean as you remember? Was there a lot of string noise, open strings that you didn't mean to be ringing? Bad muting, in other words. There's always something to work on. And record to a metronome. See if the timing is as solid as you thought it was, or does listening back make you gasp and want to re-record the entire thing over again? This is the nature of the beast when it comes to studio work and recording yourself. Live, you can get away with a lot. So now, once again, back to the original idea. Speak softly. Use a lighter technique here. And carry a big stick. When you need to be heavy-handed, this is where it comes from. It should not be here. I don't even have to do slapping to show you this. If I'm doing this line, right? I'm hitting pretty hard, obviously. As a matter of fact, if I turn my bass volume off completely, you're going to hear it in the microphone. This bass, which was once owned by Bakiti Kumalo, may I mention, and he was on the Bass Player University. He offered himself to take part in a lesson, and it was an incredible thing. We're friends. I used to get some work through him when he had overflow, and trust me, he's got overflow. This bass, he chose Bubinga for the top, and it has a swamp ash body. This bass is very loud acoustically. It's incredible. For a solid body bass guitar, very loud acoustically. Anyway, that's why you heard it so well, and I was, of course, hitting extremely hard. I'm going to lower my volume again and play something like this. Same notes. Did you guys hear any of that? Here's what just happened. Head note there, sorry. So, plucking very lightly, you're still hearing something. Right? Playing super fast, very gently. This is speaking softly. I'm playing very fast, and you're hearing everything, but I'm not playing loud. There's your minor scale super fast. And I'm using my little 3-finger technique that I had mentioned. But as I play faster, louder and louder, my left hand remains very gentle. That's the point. This isn't about showing off. I'm just letting you know that fast or heavier playing should not affect how your left hand reacts. When we slap, our usual tendency is to grab and hold very tightly here. And it's an extremely bad habit. You're choking your notes. You're already hitting the string in a way that it really doesn't want to be. The string wants this. It wants a nice normal pluck that it can handle that lets the note just sit where it is. When you hit really hard, you're potentially, just change my volume. I don't want to overdo it there if there was any clipping. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to approach the situation where you're pushing so hard that you actually choke the note out and get less sound and overall just worse tone, usually. Usually. I know there's times when that is not the case. Something else to mention is that you can push the string hard enough on a fretted instrument. You don't touch the fretboard when you fret a note. It is hanging between the frets, the string. You depress the string a little bit, it still isn't touching the fretboard. If you push hard enough, you can hit the fretboard. Listen to the actual note here. Here's me pushing really hard. Here's the without pushing hard. Are you hearing the difference? I'll try to pluck through the push. Now I'm using all my fingers for extra force, but I pushed the string hard enough to actually bend it to the point where it touched the fingerboard and changed the pitch. I did not bend. If you watch closely, I am not bending the string. It may have a tiny little move there, but I did not bend. I pushed into the fingerboard. This is how sitars work. Sitars, where they're huge frets, and you So keep that in mind too. Not only can you mess with your tone, and not only can you actually mess with your hand and your ability to play for many years, but you can actually alter the pitch and get an undesirable out of tune note. It's funny what happens when you play fretless too, because you are directly touching the wood. And it almost feels like you aren't able to push as hard. It almost feels that way. It almost feels like it gives you better technique, but it's much harder to be in tune and stay in tune and do it right. It comes more naturally to some than others. But keep this in mind when you are playing. If you are heavy-handed, and it's okay to be heavy-handed and get loud, aggressive tones, and when the time calls for it, of course. But don't let your left hand follow. Don't let your left hand grab tight and ruin its own good technique. Keep yourself gentle and find a way. I think a very good exercise for this is to do good old Victor Wooten, and he may not have been the first one to do it, of course, but certainly got people noticing, the open hammer pluck, where you pluck a note, open hammer pluck. When you do that, I think you can start to see if you're hammering way too hard, because it feels like you have to. I know that. And if you start hitting harder, see, my tendency was to go harder. Now that time I kind of controlled it a little better. So find a way to feel it. You have to pay attention to little tiny phrases. It's better not to do a random slapping practice for 20 minutes and then maybe catch it. Take a phrase. Take a random phrase, whatever it happens to be. I'm just doing the simplest thing possible right now. Take that. Notice how much you're plucking. I'm sorry, fretting. Notice how heavy you're fretting. Try to do it at different volumes. When do we lose the slap thing? If you do it way too quiet, you're going to lose the slap thing. But if your tone is right, and you can really feel it out and keep your bass volume where it needs to be, you're going to get a slap tone when you're slapping and popping. So you can find a way to be more gentle and still get that nice slap tone that you're looking for. Those crisp highs and those meaty lows doesn't sound emaciated, like you lost something just because you're using a slap technique, just because you're hitting the string hard. You still want to hit the string in a way where it's allowed to vibrate. It's allowed to do its thing. Picture a drummer who hits the drum and leaves the stick there, not letting the skin vibrate and do its thing. Because a drum head will essentially do what a string does in a certain way, at a certain level. So you're doing that to your string. If you hit it too hard, you're kind of choking the sound. And I keep using that word, but I think it's an appropriate term. You don't want to choke your sound because you're literally choking the neck of your bass. One more way, by the way, I've certainly mentioned this before on the show here, but one more thing you can do to see how hard you actually need to pluck is to start with a very heavy pluck. For example, I'm pushing as hard as I can. Different pitch, next actual pitch. Different pitch. I'm squeezing pretty hard, so that's why I'm wincing here. So squeeze as hard as you can and pluck maybe eighth notes. Take just 1 point. We're not trying to get like alternate pluck technique here. Pluck until, squeeze as hard as I can, slowly releasing with my left hand. Listen for that, the buzz. Push back. Now I'm light. Keeping yourself at a very relaxed, but you can still get the tone you're looking for. It's the best way to do long gigs, as a person who's done over 4-hour gigs many times, sometimes 2 in a day, 3 in a day. It's possible. Oh, yes, it is so possible. Yacht club breakfast, going right into a wedding, going right into a night gig. Definitely been there. It is possible to have super long gigs, more than 2 a day. So I hope that this gave you some ideas about some of your own technique, something to think about. You can be aggressive. Your left hand should not be as much as possible. I always hear people saying it looks like that person isn't doing anything. But their right hand's usually pretty active if it sounds crazy. And the left hand's doing as little as possible. You don't have to stretch your hand out. It's okay to use gesture pointer. Yeah, it's noisy, but we'll find some techniques around it. I've helped many students find their way. And hopefully I can help you find your way as well. If you find these videos interesting, at least join my mailing list. I offer tips and inspiration from time to time, several times a month. And there'll be plenty more to come here at the Bass Player University. Check out the website. The links are in the show notes. And I hope to see you at the next class.